Anatomy of a Fall began its award season journey when it won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in May. While there's a very high floor with Palme d'Or winners, they're always good and well worth your time, of the film festival awards handed out every year, the Palme d'Or often skews towards more challenging, inscrutable, less commercial movies, like The White Ribbon, Elephant, or Titan. Anecdotally, the Coen brothers have had 9 movies in competition at Cannes over the years, including beloved ones like Raising Arizona and Fargo and No Country for Old Men and Inside Llewyn Davis, but the only one that actually took home the Palme d'Or was Barton Fink, which is among their more inscrutable movies. My point is, I sat down to watch Anatomy of a Fall not knowing much besides that it was a 2.5-hour European drama that won the Palme d'Or and was, at the time, flirting with a Best Picture nomination. So I didn't know if this was going to be like a Pulp Fiction or Parasite kind of Palme d'Or winner, or if this was going to feel a little bit like homework. Very pleased to report that Anatomy of a Fall is not remotely like homework. I found this wildly compelling. I was completely sucked in for 2.5 hours. I think we have a pretty phenomenal slate of Best Picture nominees this year, and even among that stiff competition, this is pound for pound among the most engrossing movies you'll see this year, Oscar nominated or otherwise. It's got a clean premise, it's taut, there's complex characters, there's mystery, and there's intrigue. Infidelity's involved, antidepressants are involved, 50 Cent is involved. But while it's extremely compelling, in keeping with the spirit of Palme d'Or winners, it's also kind of inscrutable and frustrating and unknowable just by the nature of the story that it's telling. The stories of a French family living in a remote house in the French Alps. The isolation of their living arrangement is one of several factors that contributes to some palpable ongoing tension between Sandra, played by Sandra Hüller, and her husband Samuel. Another source of tension is the fact that their young son Daniel, played by Milo Machado-Graner, was in an accident several years ago that was sort of Samuel's fault, and that left Daniel visually impaired due to optic nerve damage. Very early on, before we even properly meet Samuel, Daniel returns from a walk with the family dog Snoop to find his father dead on the ground, having apparently fallen from the home's 3rd-story attic window. An autopsy finds that he sustained a head injury before hitting the ground, and it's unclear whether this injury was from a blow delivered by someone pre-fall or by hitting his head on a shed mid-fall on his way to the ground. Thus, Sandra is indicted, and their visually impaired son is a key witness. So, having heard that setup, right away, Anatomy of a Fall is a really great title. Pretty obvious allusion to Anatomy of a Murder, the Jimmy Stewart Otto Preminger courtroom drama from 1959, and that movie, like this one, is about a lurid, complex murder trial. In that movie, like this one, the audience does not see the events in question. We only hear about them secondhand and are left to decide for ourselves what the truth is. And in that movie, like this one, a remarkably well-trained dog is central to the plot. Anatomy of implies an investigation, a digging into, an excavation of how something took place. Using fall is pretty provocative because that may mean murder, that may mean suicide, or that may mean accidental death. So the title's winking at the murder angle, given the proximity to the Preminger movie, but it pulls back and doesn't commit to one possibility. It's unknowable. All we know is that there was a fall. Again, the movie only shows us Daniel discovering Samuel after said fall. We later get brief glimpses of different versions of what may have transpired, a brief flash of Sandra hitting Samuel, a brief flash of Samuel jumping to his death, but it doesn't commit to either as reality. It's unknowable. So the trial is obviously about attempting to find the truth in this unknowable case, but it also kind of becomes about the unknowability of this relationship. The titular fall is both the literal one Samuel takes, but also about the fall of their marriage and the anatomy thereof. At the trial, Samuel's therapist appears as a witness and kind of arrogantly assumes he knows about Sandra and Samuel's relationship, but he's basing that off one side of the story. Sandra says relationships are like a chaos, and that if she had a therapist, he could say some awful things about Samuel.
You come here, okay, with maybe your opinion, and you tell me who Samuel was and what we were going through. But what you say is just it is just a little part of the whole situation, you know. I mean, sometimes a couple is kind of a chaos, and everybody is lost, no? And sometimes we fight together, and sometimes we fight alone, and sometimes we fight against each other. That happens.
How things look from the outside may not be how things actually are. Sandra and Samuel's marriage was complicated, and they had a lot of resentment for each other for complicated reasons. But does that mean Sandra would kill Samuel? To try to answer this, the trial is a microscopic examination of their relationship dynamic. And part of the movie's point is that zooming in and examining the intimate details of a complex relationship as an outsider is often going to make that relationship look toxic and potentially deadly. Sandra Hüller is pretty incredible here. As a murder suspect, she's implicitly someone people are going to watch very closely for any sign of guilt or deception. And whether she's innocent or guilty, she's under a lot of pressure to make sure she acts innocent in every way at all times. And that's a reality for Sandra the character, but also for Sandra Hüller, because we don't know if she did it, so we too are going to scrutinize every gesture. And Hüller's performance shines under that scrutiny. Particularly remarkable is that Hüller speaks 2 languages in this movie, neither of which is her first language, which is a bit of a plot point, as Sandra has to defend herself and choose her words very carefully in what would appear to be her 3rd language, until she gets special permission from the court to speak in her 2nd language. And if you want to see Sandra Hüller act in her 1st language, check out fellow Best Picture nominee Zone of Interest. Maybe know what you're getting with that one before you fire it up, though. How the movie slowly metes out information about Samuel is also pretty interesting. He's unseen but heard in the first scene, or he's not actually heard, but he orally makes his presence known. Then he's dead. Then he's seen in pictures from his and Sandra's past, and then we later hear his voice, and then we finally see him like a full hour and a half in. And how they do that is in keeping with the whole conceit of the movie, that we know very little early on, we have no context for their relationship, we haven't met him or seen them together, and then we slowly get more and more information and context, and the lines are filled in a little bit more. When we finally get to meet Samuel, by the time that scene's over, the lines are very filled in. Not for nothing, the movie's a pretty fascinating look at how French courts work. Vast majority of the court movies I've seen have taken place in American courts, where there's a little bit different decorum. I was surprised who was allowed to speak in this court and to whom at any given time. Way more crosstalk here, which is arguably more dramatic, so no complaints. And that's to say nothing of the garb. Yes, judges often have robes in American courts, but apparently lawyers also get in on that in France. Speaking of which, both lawyers are excellent in this. I won't disrespect them by failing to pronounce their names, but this guy, as the defense attorney, Vincent, is awesome. And he is maybe kind of sorta as close as we get to an audience POV character. So the defense attorney has more screen time, but this dude, as the prosecutor, makes a meal of the screen time he gets. Vincent actually gets the line in Act 1 that some in the business like to call the theme stated. He's asking Sandra questions about the day of Samuel's death, and surmising that though she's not yet an official suspect, she's going to be. So she says point blank what has been unsaid up to this point.
I did not kill him.
That's not the point.
Her fate is not a question of whether or not she did it. It's a question of whether or not she can convince people she didn't do it. Director Justine Triet, Oscar nominated, co-wrote this screenplay with her partner Arthur Harari, also Oscar nominated. Kind of brave to write a movie like this with your romantic partner, by the way. During Triet's Golden Globes acceptance speech, she said,
Remember, we kept on saying, okay, well, we are having a lot of fun, but it's radical and dark. Nobody is going to see this movie. It's too long, they talk all the time, there's no score. A couple fighting, suicide, a dog vomiting. Come on.
Thanks in part to the unquestionable wisdom of the Academy, a lot of people are going to see this movie, and that's awesome.